Chahoua Gecko, the younger cousin of the Leachianus, and one of the only nucals that I think have the best camouflage pattern. I have to say, I have to be the most underrated species out of all the New Caledonian geckos that I usually see out there, and I honestly think they're pretty amazing. Gassing up the Chahoua aside, there are definitely some things you should know before you embark on your journey of owning the Chahoua Gecko, which is why we made today's video. Stick around while we talk about some fun facts about the Chewy that you may or may not know, good tips that'll help you when it comes to owning the Chahoua. Let's get into it. Kicking things off, let's go into topic number 1, which is going to be the temperament of the Chewy. When people start getting into Chahoua geckos, they usually move up the New Caledonian ladder, right? You start out with crested geckos, the easiest gecko to handle. They might be a little jumpy, but hey, that's not really that big of a deal. Then you move on to the gargoyle gecko, a little bit more flighty. Maybe sometimes you see them open the mouth or try to bite you, but I actually don't think I've ever been bit by a gargoyle to this day. And then finally, the Chahoua. In my opinion, the temperament of the Chahoua is going to be a lot more similar to the Leachianus than it would be to a gargoyle or crested. These guys can be a little bit temperamental, not as bad as the Leachy geckos. God, when those things want to be defensive, they will be defensive. Look, I just got a little bit of a scrape from my last bite of my Leachy. Chahoua geckos are a little bit similar to that. Not as bad as any type of the means. I will say they are probably the second most bites I get from New Caledonian geckos. Ironically, from the 2 pairs I have and all the babies that I produce, it's only been the females that bite me. While I don't think it's sex specific on which one's going to be mean and which one isn't going to be mean, quote unquote, I will say the males have been a lot more handleable in the small pool that I own over here, and the females have been a little bit more feisty, we'll say. Like the Leachianus though, this does seem to stem from cage defensiveness or territorialness, not necessarily pure aggressiveness, right? So when you get the Leachy out of the cage, they're going to be fine. When you get the Chahoua out of the cage, it is going to be fine. Another good thing is the size as well. You know, you're not getting bit by a 2,000 gram giant, world's largest gecko. You're getting bit by something that looks like about a quarter to half the size. So the bites really aren't that bad. They're few to far between, but it is something to know that this isn't going to be as easy to handle as, say, a crested gecko. But moving on, let's get into topic number 2, which is going to be the calcium requirements for the Chahoua gecko. Now, while this is going to be more along the lines of if you're trying to breed Chahoua, I do also think if you do end up getting a female and she is laying infertile eggs, this will also apply to them as well. Chahoua gecko eggs can be described in 2 different ways. Super big for the size of the animal. The size of the eggs that these things poop out is absolutely incredible versus the size of the actual gecko. And then how hard the eggshell is. Unlike things like crested geckos, gargoyles, things of that nature, the eggs feel very soft, almost like a rubbery consistency. This is not going to be the case with Chahoua geckos. It's almost similar to like a day gecko egg. It has a very hard exterior, very, very calcified. I would definitely say it has to be one of the most calcified out of all the new cal eggs that I do over here. I don't know about the ceramatonins. The what? When it comes to Leachies, gargoyles, cresteds, Eurodactylotes, everything like that, their eggs pale in comparison to how calcified and hardened Chahoua gecko eggs are. What happens when you have as hard eggs as the Chahoua gecko is the amount of calcium that the gecko requires to calcify those eggs and make them to the consistency that the Chahoua gecko has. Eggs mean more calcium. I'll just phrase it like that. What does this mean for you guys? It means these guys need extra calcium, especially if you are attempting to breed the Chahoua gecko. I made this mistake my first year is I gave them a little bit of extra, but I vastly underestimated how much they need. Her actually crashed her first year of breeding. Luckily, it wasn't too bad. We were able to rehab her back up and she's good to go at this point. However, it's definitely something to keep in mind because it was a very scary situation at that point. You guys need a lot of calcium, and honestly, as far as the big 4 go when it comes to New Caledonian, this is one of the only species where I would definitely lean a lot more into the requirement of UVB versus not. You can definitely get away with not using UVB as long as you're properly supplementing him, but it definitely does give a helpful boost of providing UVB for Chewies. To the fiasco of my first year breeding, we've given them UVB and we have gotten some good eggs when they're actually fertile. Is this a you problem? The female's laying the eggs, but you seem to have a problem making them life. Coming up, if you are breeding Chahoua geckos or you do end up with a female and is around season and you do notice her laying, I would definitely tack on that calcium to make sure she has enough reserves. Remember, just like crested geckos, you can check the calcium sacs in the Chewy by simply just opening the mouth and you'll see 2 sacs. Here's a helpful little JPEG to help you out with that, to make sure that she is getting enough calcium, that there is enough, and that there's no risk of crashing. Quick, boys and girls, before we move on with today's video, I just want to talk a little bit about the Patreon page. If you love everything we do over here, you enjoy enjoy the videos, you want to see me keep slopping them out 2 to 3 times a week, then Patreon is a great way to support us with everything we do over here. You guys get some great behind the scenes stuff when it comes to our various handful of breeding projects that we do now. You guys get up-to-date pictures when these animals are laying eggs, when those eggs are hatching, and you're able to buy them before I sell them off to the public. Includes little Chahua eggs. If you're looking for a baby Chewy, we have one now. Patreon members know about it. You guys don't, because I haven't updated my morph market in quite a while. Various tiers come with a bunch of goodies depending on how much you want, how much you're able, but all the same, Old Dakota appreciates every penny. Let's just keep doing everything we're doing here with the Project Jungle, all the bioactive stuff, all the lighting. God, my electric bill is so high. We'll also get your name in the credits that you'll see at the end. How incredible is that? Thank you guys so much. Let's get back into the video. Moving things along, let's get into the third topic at hand, which is going to be number 3. Had to do those fingers twice. Number 3, the locality difference between Chahuas. Once again, a little bit more on the breeding side, but if you are keeping with the plans to breed, it is helpful information to know. Unlike things like the crested gecko and gargoyle gecko, there are actually distinct different localities between Chahua, and these are tracked a lot better. There isn't like much of like a novelty of having lineage with crested geckos, because let's be honest, only 400 were imported in, and now they're all just mass inbred because we create thousands upon thousands, so you're just getting lineage of what you're inbreeding to what you're inbreeding. No, Chahua geckos are actually tracked a lot more. Think of stuff like the green tree python, the carpet python, where lineage plays a much bigger role into the projects that you have with them. When it comes to Chahua, there are going to be 3 categories you're going to look into. 2 are going to be the big locales, that being mainland versus Pine Island. Some people call it Pine Island. Some of it is ISLE, Pine Isle, I believe it's phrased. And then the third one being a cross of the 2. Pressing localities is generally a little bit frowned upon, but it happens. I do it. Sorry. 2 biggest differences you're going to find between the mainland versus the Pine Island are going to be a couple of different things. The Pine Isle, I have to pick one. I can't keep doing both. Pine Island Chahua geckos are generally going to be a larger gecko. They're going to have a better pattern. You're going to see a lot more of that white collaring. The colors are going to be a little bit brighter, and so on. Also see with the head pattern, the mainland seem to have more of like, I refer to as like a pug nose. It's a shorter snout, whereas the Pine Isles have a little bit of a longer one. Mainlands are going to be a smaller locale. The pattern isn't going to be as great. They usually come in as like a very brown gecko, and then of course the pug-shaped nose. And then the hybrid of the 2 are going to be a hybrid of the 2. When I first started my Chahua breeding journey, I did not think about lineage whatsoever. I bought these geckos for $1,000 during a California sale that I stayed up till 3 in the morning to purchase these, not knowing any lineage whatsoever. Judging by the descriptions that I gave to both of those sections, I believe the male is Pine Island and the female is mainland. This is just because this dude, he does seem larger, the face is different, you kind of have some shouldering going on over there, and then of course the pattern just looks a lot better than the females. But without having any proper lineage on these animals, I classify into the 3rd category, which is what I refer to as GTX, GT Cross. That just might be a me thing. I actually don't know what people label them. I label them like I would with my lychee geckos, which is GTX. That would be a hybridization or an unknown where the animal came from. If you're looking to get into breeding the Chahua gecko, I would definitely pay a lot more attention to specific locales that you're getting and the lineage behind those locales versus just getting whatever, basically doing what I do. Over here, I sell pet geckos generally. I'm not too big into the lineage game, and I have a very, I think I only have 2 pairs of Chahua geckos and then a couple of babies. So I'm not big in Chahuas by any means. Maybe one day I will be, and at that point we'll take a lot more of a closer look. But if you're just looking for a pet gecko, the GT crosses are definitely fine. I think they make very pretty geckos. My pair over here look very nice. The male has this cool pattern. It's almost a mix between what the dad and the mom look like into one gecko, which I think is really cool. But if you want to get serious into breeding, I would definitely pay a lot more attention to the locality. Boys and girls, now it's bonus time because I couldn't think of a 4th one to talk about. So let's do a little bit of a segue and talk a little bit about why I believe the Chahua gecko is such an underrated species. I believe the biggest factor on why Chahua geckos are so underrated stems from the price of the animal. And while don't get me wrong, I don't believe this is an overpriced gecko in any way, shape, or form. You have to think of the consistency of the amount that you're getting, right? right? So when we talk about the other big four, you know, cressids, gargoyles, lychees, you're gonna get an average of 12 to 20 eggs depending on the species. Whereas chahuas, you can generally shoot for a maximum of 6 eggs. That's the best I've ever done over here. Maybe other Chahua breeders are doing better, but 6 is the best that I could do. It is only 6 babies for the year. Only 3 clutches out of the, you know, 10 to 14 clutches that crested geckos have. When you have a smaller clutch size of these animals, the value of the animal is definitely more because there's a less supply for them. But that kind of reaches into a double-edged sword, right? These geckos are more expensive because they are rarer, so to say, as we can't produce as many of them as we can the other counterparts, but at the end of the days, these guys will always be shadowed by the Leachianus. The poor man's lychee, they're the cousin of the lychee. These guys will always be the smaller little brother. The issue stems from, well, if I only have to pay a couple $100 more, right? It's not huge. We're not talking like crested to lychee, but when we're talking about crested to Chahua versus Chahua to lychee, the price isn't that big of a difference, unfortunately. Which means more often than not, people are going to opt for getting the largest species out there. Now, while I think Chahoua geckos are definitely a personality and they definitely have a special place in my heart, unfortunately, big potato versus pickle, they're gonna get the potato, and that's just the fact of the matter. However, just like how I try to convince my girlfriend every night, size isn't the thing that matters, right? Chahoua geckos definitely have their place, and there are a bunch of pros versus them and the lychees. Biggest one being, I think they are far superior when it comes to look. The camouflage patterning and just the overall style of Chahoua is a lot cooler than what you can get out of lychee geckos. Second biggest thing is the fact that these guys are still small enough where you can do a bioactive vivarium for them. I have a beautiful 18 by 24 viv for these guys. While they have squashed some of the plants, there are still some that are thriving, and it's just a beautiful enclosure. However, when it comes to the lychees, I can't do that. The only thing I've found that is able to survive is a potted pothos plant. Anything else just immediately get crushes, because of course big gecko means big gecko, and while that is a pro to look at, it is a negative when it comes to putting plants in the enclosure. I also find handling is a lot better if that is your thing. Leachianus, everyone wants to hold a Leachianus until you hold a Leachianus and you feel the weight and the claws digging into you. You'll constantly have a bunch of little pin pricks. They'll get caught in your skin. You have to unhook them out. This isn't the same as Chahua. Chahua, you can handle it like a crested and a gargoyle gecko because there isn't that big of a size difference on them. And overall, I just think they make a better pet. Leeches are an awesome display animal, and when you do take them out, they're fun to take out, but oh man, I almost want to wear gloves for mine because it's just like those annoying little pin pricks that like you go in your pockets and you're like, ow, what was that? You try to wash your hair, shampoo in my cuts. It's very annoying. At the end of it, don't sleep on the Chahoua gecko. The species definitely has its place in the hobby, and it shouldn't just be seen as the younger brother of the lychee. If you guys want to check out some more videos we've done of the Leachianus, here's a cool playlist of all our New Caledonian geckos, or a cool video that we recently did with our chewies. Of course, as always, thank you so much for taking the time of your day to follow us over here at Dakota Blue Exotics. I will see you guys next time, but until then, goodbye.